Okay, so this is a tomato review for the Minzano. Now, this is the mini Manzano. It's a proprietary tomato variety that you can't buy seeds for, and you can't sell seeds. I mean, they can't really stop you from growing it like me, but this is the Minzano, and I got this tomato seed from the Wild Wonders pack. I figured I'd grow it out for an interesting little twist of things. Not that I'm trying to cheap out on the other heirlooms, but I like those tomatoes. I usually eat those during the winter because that's really all you could eat during the winter. Most of the other tomatoes taste so bad that you don't even want to eat tomatoes. So I figured I would give this one a try, and I love the tomato, and I figured I'd grow it out. So here we are, and you can see that this plant is doing pretty good. It's a regular leaf tomato, and it would have probably did a lot better if it wasn't for the extreme weather we had this year, and just the blight itself. The late blight is kicking in. It's really wiping out all my tomatoes now. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get as big of a harvest from this as I would have liked to, simply because of the fungal diseases that are just wiping out the tomatoes right now. But in any case, this is how they grow. They grow in a bract like that. And let me see if I could pick one to show it to you. Now, the shapes are kind of varying a little bit with this particular variety. Some of them kind of stay more like a, I don't know, paste tomato shape. And then some of them are really long like this. So the shapes are really varying. And here's one that's kind of like a pumpkin a little bit. So they do vary a little bit, but nonetheless, as far as I know, the research I did on it, the name of the tomato for this particular variety of tomato was called the Minzano. So I'd imagine it was crossed somewhere with a Marzano and a something else, maybe a cherry tomato of some type, and they came up with this variety. But I was actually infatuated with this variety when I did the taste test back on the Wild Wonders video. And I figured I had to grow this thing to find out if this is something I'd like to grow over here. Is this a Monsanto hybrid, genetically altered tomato? I have no idea. I don't think it would be. I think it was... I did read a little bit about the people who work for Sunset and the tomato engineer. I read a little bit about his background. This guy has an extensive background with tomato cultivation. And so he really knows a lot more about tomatoes than probably most people out there that work with tomatoes. He's basically a scientist, so he knows what varieties will cross and how to do it that way. But I don't believe that this is genetically engineered in any way, as far as I know. It's just a simple cross-culture tomato, maybe with a cherry tomato with the Marzano, and I think that's maybe what they came up with. But it's a regular leaf. The scent isn't really coming out strong this year. Now, and the reason why I'm smelling the leaves is because a lot of these tomatoes that are coming off this Wild Wonders pack seem to have this fruity smell to the tomato plant, and that's leading me to believe that there's a common gene that they crossed into that plant for that scent, and that smell is usually like a Galapagos Island tomato, has that very strong fruity smell. It's like one of the only tomato plants I know, other than all these other hybrids that are popping up, that have that fruity smell. So, but as far as I can tell, this tomato virtually has no smell to the plant or the leaf or anything, It smells generally like a regular tomato, but the leaves kind of smell a little fruity on it. But I don't know, that's about all I could say. I just kind of wanted to show you what it looks like, if you decide to grow it, what it's going to look like. It's got a long bract on it. It looks like it gets anywhere between 2, 4, 6, 8, probably about 10 tomatoes on a bract, 6 to 10 on a bract. Might get a little more. Here's one that's really coming out, like that. And I don't really have any flowers. Here's a flower to it. All right, that's a flower, and just lots of tomatoes coming out of it. So it's a pretty productive variety. It's probably doing a little better than most of my other tomatoes. It seems to be fighting off the late blight. It's very resistant to it. Early blight's not even an issue. It's the late blight. The late blight is one of the diseases almost no tomato can really fight off. It's such a bad fungal disease. So it's really trying to fight it off. we'll see how it goes. I may have to chop this one down to the ground and let the new stems come up, and hopefully I get another harvest. But I don't know. We'll have to see where, where it goes from here. All right, so I'll see you at the table. Okay, so we're up to the tomato review part of this video. And again, this is the Minzano tomato. I got these from the Wild Wonders pack, and we're going to taste test this tomato and give it a go. Now, before I do that, I'm just going to tell you what I know about it. It's a Solanum lycopersicum. It's an indeterminate tomato, and the shapes vary quite a bit on these tomatoes. I'll show you the inside of it first. Okay, that's what it looks like on the inside. And so the shapes vary quite a bit on this. Typical of a Marzano tomato. Now the Minzano is a hybridized version of the Marzano. It's basically a grape-sized Marzano tomato is really what it's supposed to be. It's just a snacking tomato. It's not made for making sauces. It's a novelty tomato is really what it is. And that's basically what it's supposed to be. Now, in general, the Marzano tomatoes are generally used for making paste, and this tomato is more of a snacking tomato. So what they crossed it with, I'm really not sure. But the bottom of the tomatoes generally have, instead of a nipple sticking out, it has like a little slot like that. You see like an inner belly button, so to speak? That's what the bottoms of these mostly look like. You see they all have that same thing, so that's a unique feature to it. The shapes vary from anything like this in shape, okay, to like this in shape, which looks like a really tiny little mini Marzano tomato is what it looks like. Here's another one. Here's a good classic example of like what a tiny little Marzano tomato would look like. That's a good classic example. But that's it. So let's give it a try. These are very nice in flavor. These are much higher in sweetness. The sweetness on this, I'm going to probably say, before I do the bricks on it, I'll probably say the sweetness on it was probably, for me, my way of rating it, 35. It was pretty high. Tangy was kind of on the low side, so probably like 30. So it was lower than the tangy part. But let's squeeze off some juice. Nine and 3/4, almost 10. So the sweetness is very high in this tomato, and you can taste it in the tomato. It does have a very sugary effect to it. Like I say, the sweetness is much higher than the tangy part. You can really pick it up pretty strongly in this tomato. Let me eat a whole one like that. It's got a nice flavor to it. I'm telling you, I like this tomato a lot. That's why I grew it. Here, I cut the round one open. Give you an idea. There's one of the round ones. This is definitely a commercial grade tomato because you can see where they really made improvements to a heirloom tomato. Like the flesh on the inside is very delectable. It's not like chalky or mushy. It's like a perfect chewy type of flesh on the inside. It's a very, very nice flesh. It's got that hollowing in it. Just so you can see that. But believe it or not, for this tomato, I would imagine the hollowing is normal. We'll cut open a long one. Because the Marzano tomatoes are supposed to be what you would normally call a hollow tomato. It's because it's basically a paste tomato. And so that those seeds normally don't attach to the rind. If you look on the inside of this, you'll see like even with this one. You see like in there, you see like the seeds ain't attached to the rind. That's the classic characteristic of a paste tomato. They don't. It's a hollow tomato, a paste tomato. They generally, it's made for, those tomatoes are bred and grown for making paste out of them, or really thick sauces and stuff. So they're not really grown for making, tomato sauce in general, or slicing and eating and putting on your sandwich. It's not made for that. It's made for paste specifically. They're grown for that reason. So this would make a fantastic tomato paste if you grew enough of these. Now, because it's very sweet too. I like that sweet effect. That would make a really nice tomato paste. But this is a snacking tomato, so this is very interesting. I've never seen I don't know if you want to call this a grape tomato, something like that, like this size. Would you consider it a grape tomato? I don't know what you'd call it. I guess it would be considered a grape tomato. But this is the first grape tomato I've ever seen that is a hollow tomato or a paste tomato of that size. Most paste tomatoes are normally big and grown, medium to plum to large size tomatoes for making large amounts of paste for making tomato paste. But this tomato is very small. It's designed for snacking. It's not made for making paste, though you probably could make paste out of it. So there's no reason to develop a grape-sized tomato that's a hollow tomato. So this is the first time I've ever seen that. So this is very unique to this tomato. But I'll take one more bite. We'll end the review. Again, the sweetness on this was pretty high. It was like, it was over 35. After having eaten a few of these, I'd say the sweetness on them was probably like a 38 or something like that. It was up there. It was definitely going up there. And the tangy part was kind of on the low side. So the tangy was probably maybe 28 or 30, something like that. So you can see there was a wide contrast between the soury and the sweet flavor. But it was a very nice experience. It was definitely something you wouldn't mind snacking on. Now these taste, from what I remember, the store-bought ones were pretty good, but this year that I grew them, these actually taste better. So I can't say I improved the flavor a little bit with this particular variety tomato. I can't say that for all the other ones, but this one definitely did show some improvement to the flavor compared to what I got in the store. So definitely worth growing. If you go to the store, you see the Wild Wonders, pick them up, pick a few of each variety of those tomatoes, save the seeds and grow them out, and you'll be able to get the same thing I got. So that's it for your tomato review on the Minzano. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.